And the route through that is certainly not down regulation. It's not slow conscious breathing. And I think a lot of people, and I'm almost certain that I've done this unintentionally at early points in my career, I go, you're stressed, you're in freeze because you're stressed. So how can we down regulate that stress? And people will go, I'm struggling to get out of bed.
Yeah. So how does this relate to the nervous system? Do you know what I mean? Even your example of that, battling with those two, and like being in someone's company who's like, oh, they're really in their heart. They're leading from that place. Then they're practicing all these things. They're not attached, but then they're also radical acceptance. But also, this is what I'm doing about certain things. So how does that relate to us as the observer of, well, it's just our nervous system as maybe a gateway in? But I'd love to open up this section on the nervous system. It's one of the biggest things I wanted to talk to you about. Yeah. Because it does relate to everything. And I was thinking the other day, listening to Irene Lyon. Did I send you her? But she was talking about sympathetic, parasympathetic, but like the different tones of the nervous system, and how I was then thinking, it doesn't really matter to me what category they're in. What do I need to understand and do about it? Again, it's like action. I've got this information, whether it's high tone, low tone, it can help. But also, what do I then implement? Yeah. How do I notice what's the symptoms? Yeah,
it brings me back to, I guess, the whole conversation around this over intellectualization. It's like the map is helpful,
not the territory.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think the understanding, it'd be easy to sit here and just sort of say it doesn't matter to what state you're in, but it does. And it's the same where I can start talking about wearable technology and going, we shouldn't need it, but actually it's helpful for a lot of people with complete disconnect from their body and their internal state, for them to start reconnecting to that and having a bit of a map and being able to go, I feel like shit. Oh, it's because I slept like shit and my HRV is low. And they go, okay, cool, that's what that feels like. And then you get to a point where I would hope most people can set the tech aside and work with their internal kind of compass. So if we think about the nervous system and we think about, I guess, more of the technicalities of this conversation and the intellectual understanding, I very much view the nervous system as the lens through which we view the world and experience the world. That's ultimately what it is. It's the pair of glasses that you're wearing to experience the world around you. The autonomic nervous system, where the breath lives, all of these kind of automatic functions.
You said breath.
Yeah, second time I said it as well. To the sort of most fundamental understanding of that is what you spoke to there, the two branches, sympathetic, parasympathetic, sympathetic being fight, flight, parasympathetic, rest, digest. Stephen Porges, you come across Stephen Porges? So he developed something called polyvagal theory, which is where a lot of Irene's work would
dense
draw from.
Book?
Yeah, I've got the brief version and it's still dense. So it's almost like if you try and condense.
She was talking about how people miss where freeze is on that spectrum.
Yeah. So polyvagal theory would speak to three states within the nervous system. We have, let's start with the good. We'll start ventral vagal.
Ooh, so good, this is good.
Yeah, it's loaded. But let's start with ventral vagal, which is us connected to self and the world around us. It's being at ease in the world. So this is our state of calm, of connection, of social engagement. Arguably where we want to sit as our sort of default. We then have the sympathetic state, fight, flight. So this is our mobilization response, our activation response, where we're ready to either fight or flee. And there'll be times, in our day where we want to be in activation. There'll be a certain amount of sympathetic activation running through our systems now to actually be in this conversation and be activated to do so. And then there is dorsal vagal, which is shut down. This is freeze. The idea really is that we have in the middle here, this is a model developed by a guy called Dan Siegel, the window of tolerance, which is sort of our ventral vagal. We're in there, we're ticking up and down. There's a bit of activation. There's a bit of kind of de-escalation. And then we have above it hyperarousal, and we have below it hypoarousal. And so if you think of this fight flight as mobilization, hypoarousal is immobilization, the shutdown. And this will help us dictate how to work with our nervous system. And this, I guess, comes back to the action piece. So the understanding comes first, and then the action piece comes off of the back of that. And so what I think the challenge here is that with this wave of, as I said, kind of bottom-up modalities, but also just nervous system regulation as a bit of a topic that's in the ether at the moment. It's a big one. The basic kind of understanding of sympathetic, parasympathetic has led us to oversimplify it and go, well, we demonize stress, we demonize the sympathetic response, the activation response, and as such, the route out of that is what we call downregulation. So how do we downregulate sympathetic arousal to bring you back into parasympathetic? When in actual fact, a lot of what people are experiencing in the world right now is hypoarousal, freeze, functional freeze, shutdown, and real procrastination, not procrastination in the very mundane sense of not doing the piece of work you want to do. Maybe that's a manifestation of it, but actually just feeling numb and dull and depressed. It's, that's where depression lives, is in that immobilization response. And the route through that is certainly not downregulation. It's not slow conscious breathing. And I think a lot of people, and I'm almost certain that I've done this unintentionally at early points in my career, I go, you're stressed, you're in freeze because you're stressed. So how can we downregulate that stress? And people will go, I'm struggling to get out of bed. So that's not going to be the answer, is to take energy down, take you even into a lower energy state. And so that is, I think, the understanding piece is going, okay, helping people first and foremost connect to their bodies, because we are so wildly disembodied that we're living completely here with no understanding of the sensations, some people not even feeling the sensations. So how could you possibly know what your current state is? So connect to the body, build this interoceptive capacity to feel those sensations, and then interpret those sensations and understand what your individual markers of sympathetic are and what your individual markers of shutdown and dorsal are. And from there, take action accordingly and appropriately. So at a basic kind of fundamental level, we'd come back to those three kind of lanes: top down, bottom up, outside in. Outside in is important and key here. I think we underestimate a little bit, like I spoke to, kind of that social engagement, that being in the world, that moving my body, that all of that piece. I think setting up a healthy home environment as well for that, morning sunlight, grounding, all of these things, biohacking, and creating an environment that supports regulation and organization in the nervous system. But then also using techniques to bring you either out of that dorsal shutdown or out of that sympathetic overdrive. And so I think that's, I guess, the map. And then there's the action piece that comes off of that.
So let's dive into functional freeze.
Yeah.
Because if we're observing our culture, firstly, why do you think everyone's there? And we can talk about childhood.
Yeah.
Who's really getting their needs met in that area of their life. But I think functional freeze, the why, but then also how to notice when you are.
The why is, I think it runs deep. I think it brings me back to some of the things we've already touched upon in terms of convenience, path of least resistance, where we don't have to, it's convenience over challenge. It's, distraction over discipline. It's kind of all of these things where...
That'd be the nice guy syndrome, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Symptoms there.
Autopilot, nice guy, people please, self-abandon, run on autopilot, do as you're told. We're not living, and we wonder why.
Sorry.
Yeah. So, couple that with constant, overwhelming overstimulation, constant. Quite often, and this is again it's a slight simplification, but quite often if we head way up into sympathetic, they'll reach a tipping point where we just shut down. And for quite a lot of people, that I think is a manifestation of the why here as well, is prolonged, consistent overstimulation, noise, tech, everything that is pushing us and pushing us and pushing us with no respite. We, as a society, cannot sit still. We cannot. The number of times I used to roll my eyes at people that say I can't meditate, and actually I go, of course you fucking can't meditate, because your nervous system is just completely in overwhelm.
What do you do now?
I go, here's some breathwork. I do, at a very fundamental level. That's why I believe in breathwork as a tool, because it's an active protocol to help regulate the nervous system into a state where stillness might feel achievable. And so it's like breathe your way into a state where you could meditate and get something from it. So then I guess the layer deeper would be childhood trauma, safety. We're all craving this, ultimately, this sense of safety. That's what that ventral vagal state is. It's social and safe. And we don't feel safe. Many of us, whether that's past trauma,
with our
present
family,
trauma,
with our friends, at work.
Yeah. I think that the sort of individualism, the like hyper individualistic nature of our society, we're, as people always say, more connected than ever and more disconnected than ever. Loneliness is something I have battled with and do battle with. Yeah. I think it's a legacy of my upbringing. I think it's a legacy of phone addiction throughout my life. Sometimes more comfortable interacting online than in person, feeling more comfortable being vulnerable online than in person, and almost we hide behind the screen as a way to connect. And I think that is going to spike fear. That loneliness, that kind of feeling of disconnection is going to keep ticking us into a resting state of unease, a resting state of just not quite feeling like I can just settle and be still. And that puts us into this free state, puts us into this shutdown, this numbness.
I remember when I used to work in events a lot, so it's pretty full on. We'd work all week, and so I moved to London for a good year, 2 years, and the weekend would come, and if I was in London and the sun was out, I'd get so anxious. And I think this was related to that, because at work I had a sense of belonging or purpose, let's say, and we can segue this into the meaning that we're all craving also or lacking. But like I had this sense, and I have to really tune back to it because I forget what it was like. And the weekend would come and I'd have a free schedule. And I'd be riddled with anxiety. And I think my nervous system was so like alarmed at like, where are my friends? What do I do? How do I spend this time? Like, it was just like time's running out, falling through my hands. Like what? And it was related to this kind of like shock of just space, stillness. Go and be. I can't. And it makes so much sense, like from that kind of framework.
Yeah. And just this inability to be with ourselves. I think that's the biggest thing I see. And it's, again, not our fault, as in the odds are stacked against us, but
it is our responsibility.
It is our responsibility. It really, in its purest form, you can either sit there and go, woe is me, or you can do something about it.